Welcome back and welcome to the next session on driving equal access to finance for young women entrepreneurs. We know that young women entrepreneurs have the ideas, they have ambition, they have the skill set. What's often a problem really is finance. And today we're going to take a look at suitable funding opportunities and how young women entrepreneurs can access them. We have an incredible lineup of speakers joining me today, an incredible panel, and I'm going to take a minute to introduce my guests to you. We have with us Adenike Adeyemi, Executive Director of the Fate Foundation. We have Anita, Tiessen, CEO, Youth Business International, Sofía, Benjumea, Head of Google for Startups in EMEA, and Wendy, Teleki, Head of the WeFi Secretariat. WeFi is Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative at the World Bank. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to begin by really understanding what is the number one barrier young women entrepreneurs face when they are trying to get funding to launch their businesses. So in your experience and through the work you do, if you had to pick the one biggest obstacle, what is it? I'd love to go around the room and get you to give me a response in just about 1 minute, and then we'll do a deep dive into these issues later on. So Sofía, let me begin with you.
Hi, thank you, Mallika, and thank you all for inviting me. So, as you say, I lead Google for Startups, first, there's so much talent. So I love to hear you say that is there. In terms of challenges, the core challenge that female founders in the startup world, which is a kind of a very specific world within the whole branch of entrepreneurship, is definitely among them is the funding, is access to funding. There is only 2% of the capital raised in Europe that was raised by women, and only 16% of the women do raise VC capital in order to kind of create their projects. Mainly the reason is, I think I hear that I want to point it out. There's a point of actually women not going to that direction, but I think mainly is the lack of diversity in the VC funds. I think it's important to draw the attention that the diversity has to come from all the different players of the ecosystem. And I think that there are immense talent in the startup world coming from female founders. The percentage is less, of course, but I think we have to work on making it grow. But I think we need to ensure that there's also more diversity in the VC world.
More diversity in the VC world. That's a great point. I want to come back to that for sure. Wendy, I'm coming to you next for your 1 minute.
Great. Thank you so much, Mallika, and thank you for having me here at this great event. And it was really thrilling to see Julia Gillard earlier, who's such an iconic voice for women's empowerment. So it's exciting to have these rich perspectives. The Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, we work in about 52 countries and emerging markets to support women entrepreneurs. And so we see a lot of challenges in very, very different environments, but often we see very similar issues coming up when it comes to young entrepreneurs, primarily around the fact that they're building their track record, they're building their credit histories, they're building up their asset base, they're building up their networks. And so it becomes very challenging for them to access formal finance, which traditionally has been very, very focused on getting collateral, guarantees, and being based on kind of hard asset financing. So we think a lot about how we look at alternatives to collateral, how we look at other alternative types of financing, not only from banks, but from fintechs and trade finance type mechanisms, as well as how we can spur the entrepreneurial ecosystem and the venture capital space. And I could not agree more with Sofía that bringing diversity into the financial sector is going to be very, very important, because when women are making investment decisions, they invest more in women.
That's a great point. Adenike, I'm coming to you next.
Great, thanks, Mallika. And I'm happy to be on this panel. I have to say that I was a mentor on the Cherie Foundation for about 2 years, so this feels like coming back to home. The main challenge that we see, we've been supporting businesses for the last 21 years, and about half of them are women-led businesses. But specifically for women-led businesses and SMEs in particular, what we've seen is that the funding and the financing that is available is still very structured to male-led businesses. So the design, the criteria, the structure is not flexible to accommodate the needs and the requirements that women-led businesses have. To give you a better perspective of this, if you're going to seek levels of debt, the first thing I have to say is that there's quite an increased level of grants and cheaper funding that we've seen that's available for women businesses in Nigeria more than ever before. But when you're now talking about growth financing, the structures, the collateral requirements, you're asking for landed assets, you're asking for collateral that men are typically the ones that are able to provide them. That puts the women at a disadvantage. So yes, we're seeing funds coming in for early stage businesses, but the growth stage businesses are still a challenge because of the design, the structure, and a lot of the criteria around the fund that put women at a disadvantage.
So we need to focus more on the growth stage businesses. Yes. Anita, your turn.
Well, a lot of what I would say would echo what the others have said. So what I might do is turn it around and say, I think it's a lack of looking at the potential of women and youth and designing the products that will actually unlock that potential. Because I think as Youth Business International, when we look at young women entrepreneurs, it's all the perception and finance structuring issues to do with being a woman, and then the experience and collateral issues to do with being young. So you've got, as it were, a double knock against you. Yeah. And I'd like to, later on, I'd like to pick up on the diversity point, because I think that's been exacerbated through the pandemic as well, where people's circles have narrowed rather than broadened.
Let's jump into the diversity angle right away. Sofía, I'll come back to you with that. When you talk about how we need more diversity in the VC world, can you expand on that a little bit more? Do you mean we need more gender diversity or racial diversity? What kind of diversity are you talking about?
Well, I mean, I think diversity is a concept that always has to go together with inclusion. I think it's just ensuring that we get into areas where everyone feels heard and feels that they have the same opportunities. At Google for Startups, that is our mission, is to really level the playing field for all the founders to be able to succeed despite their gender, their race, or their origin. So this is what we do. We've been working as a team much more focused on really ensuring that we are working with a very diverse group of founders. Diversity also depends and changes whenever we're actually working in the UK, or we're working in Spain, or we're working in Africa, or we're working in Poland. Diversity also has a different meaning depending on where you are and what's the reality of the local ecosystem. What I see is that, one, as I was saying in the beginning, there's so much talent. I mean, I've been here, yes. I've been almost 7 years in this team, and we've accelerated an immense amount of women that are leading tech-based, extremely innovative startups that are going global, that are competing in the world. And I think that's the first thing that I want to say, is giving more visibility to this woman. And then, but it's true, launching and being a founder of a startup, it's challenging. So there's a lot of things that we can address just by the fact of actually being a female founder in the startup world. Just the fact of being a founder in the startup world is very, very challenging. But I see it this morning. I was a really good friend, female founder from a fintech global company. And she was saying, still now, I have to bring my co-founder to raise funds. It's easier for him to draw the attention. It's easier for him to make this connection. And she also gave me I think examples are very good when we're talking about this. And she was like, when I went into, actually, I'm come from Spain, based in Spain, and actually we've gone very good into actually having 3 of the top VC funds in Spain are now led by women. But she was saying, when I went to the UK and more broadly in Europe to raise more international capital for kind of follow-up funds, out of the 15 funds that I visited, I only met with a woman once. That is challenging. And even more, if we address what are the female founders innovating in, there's a big percentage of the female founders that are innovating towards issues that women have. So that actually makes the problem even deeper, because at the end of the day, not only are you having this disconnection that might or might not happen between raising funds, a woman raising funds towards only men, but it's also that they're tackling and they're explaining issues or opportunities that maybe men have understand less or have less visibility over the potential. So I think this is where we need to, and this is the role we're playing, we need to really ensure that we help these women grow. And when sometimes VCs or accelerators, or we say there's not enough, I'm like, you know what? Yes, the percentage is about 16%, 17% of female founders, but we've managed to have a 40% representation overall in Europe of female founders in our programs. They are women doing amazing projects. The talent is there. I think we need to just really work on allowing those women to grow and giving them the visibility, so there are more and more that get inspired to really dare to be ambitious and dare to do this kind of entrepreneurship, which is just a portion of all the amazing work that female founders do as entrepreneurs.
I was really struck with by what you said about your friend who said she had to take her co-founder with her because he's a man. And we recently interviewed this amazing chef in London, Azma Khan. She has this restaurant, Darjeeling Express. If y'all haven't eaten there, you must. It's a terrific Indian restaurant. She talked about how difficult it was for her to get funding to move to a bigger space, and she needed a bigger space. Her restaurant has a waiting list of 6 months. And she said, it's because I am not a man in a suit. And it struck me with what you said. I can't believe we're at this stage where we still have to do that, have to have a man in a suit escort women when they're trying to get VC funding. And another statistic that struck me was, I think Helen said this, that 85% of VC funding in the US went to white male founders in 2019. So clearly there is a lot of work to do here. Anita, I know you wanted to jump into the diversity topic. So, and you said you think it's been made worse after the pandemic?
Yeah, so earlier this week, we launched our report, the findings of the COVID Rapid Response Support Program that we ran with the support of Google across 32 countries. And in some of the deep dives, we've been looking at the support for either extremely economically marginalized women entrepreneurs or Black ethnic minority founders. And they're really saying that in a world where people stopped meeting face to face, where all those kind of incidental connections were no longer possible, that people reverted to the people they knew, the circles they knew, and therefore the people that they would invest in. So if there's a huge challenge to kind of get to meet the people, to get to present to people, to get to be taken seriously by the people who could invest, all of that was made more difficult by literally the lack of visibility, you know, in this context. But I would really echo what Sofía was saying, that thing about how do you come across as investable, as it were, as a woman. So from the same research, one of our young women entrepreneurs from the Philippines was saying it's a real struggle. She says if you're too strong, then you're seen as dominant or alpha. But if you're too soft, then the trust of investors or others is low. So where do you find that middle space? But also what Adenike was saying about looking at the kind of micro, small, and medium enterprise space as well. I think we need a shift in, and I know there's some experimentation taking place here, a shift in looking at how do you actually find the potential and structure products around the potential. So for young people, it's about, do you look at the power of the business plan and the other support they're getting, rather than the capital or the track record, for example, that they might have, or tranched products, or lower interest rates, ways of de-risking investments for people that initially will not bring as much to the table that they would when they're 30 or 40, for example. So I think there's a conscious shift needs to be made to look at the potential of women, young entrepreneurs to make a contribution, and how do things need to change. And that will change when some of the decision makers at different levels are more diverse and inclusive as well.
Wendy, I want to come to you next. You talk about alternative means of financing. So at the moment, if venture capital isn't very generous towards young women entrepreneurs, where else can young women entrepreneurs turn to for financing?
We really look across the ecosystem of different financing institutions, and we work with about 140 different partners around the world to support women entrepreneurs. So that includes working with banks. We do work with banks to try to help them develop digital products and more working capital products that can support women who are earlier in the stages where they're needing working capital for their activities. So for example, we've worked through the World Bank with Access Bank to develop a digital financial debt product that allows women to get access to loans without collateral. So they can do that earlier in their business development. It also helps them build up their credit history. And that's very, very important as you move into bigger types of loans and credit on the debt side. So we look at how do we use digital data? How do we improve financial infrastructure so that things like payments and credit information are online and people, the banks and financial institutions can use that data and trade data, right? So if people are working on e-commerce, so that they can use that kind of data to show their credit worthiness and to show their track record, which is going to be thinner for younger entrepreneurs. And because women work quite a bit in retail and the trade industries, they don't have the kinds of assets that men have. So really trying to get digital trails for financial interactions is very, very important for women entrepreneurs. On the other hand, we don't foreclose the need for more and more on the equity side. So we do work with angel investors and VCs. We've been very gratified to see that if you look at the SAGE report, there have been over the last year more funds at least indicating that they're taking a gender lens. I think it's about double this last year, taking a gender lens than ever before. Now we need to see that translate into actual money going in. So we work with a lot of accelerators and funds to try to get them to focus more on women. That means more in the pipeline. How do they get more women in the pipeline? One is having more women investors who know how to find women entrepreneurs, who know the industries that those entrepreneurs are in, and then helping to keep them focused on getting them the capital that they need. We did some research with Village Capital through the International Finance Corporation, which showed that actually historically, accelerators have not helped women get equity. They have helped women get debt, but not equity. So we want to change that.
And I know Sofía wants to jump in here and talk about, give us an example of what Wendy is.
Yeah, I think Wendy, you were pointing on by having kind of specific funds focus on a specific minority or underrepresented groups, the immense impact that this can have. This year at Google, we launched the Black Founders Fund, both in Europe and in Africa. First, it was launched in Europe, and I think it's important to kind of go to the data that we've heard. Like with all Black Founders Fund, we're underfunded, and while they represent 3.5% of the UK's population, for example, only 0.24% were being invested. We launched this 2 million equity-free fund for Black Founders Fund that went to 30 recipients. And in less than 3 months, these founders have received 50 million in follow-on investments. And I think this is, first of all, they did it because they're amazing founders. But I think just also the ability to show and to have big organizations show that their talent is there, that the potential is there, has immensely helped them kind of open those doors that before were closed. And just like by their value and their talent, that they're going to continue showing their potential. But I think this is just an example on how focusing on specific underrepresented groups funds can have an impact in the whole ecosystem.
Adenike, I want to come to you next. Already the word collateral has come up a lot. Tell me, how challenging is it for young women entrepreneurs to show that they have collateral, to actually have it and use that as an asset to try and get funding?
So it's very challenging, as Anita had said, and I think that age and gender is a multi-bullet that is against women. So what you typically find is that when you're asked to bring collateral for larger funds here, they ask about landed assets, so land, houses, where typically a lot of women, so even if you look at laws around being able to get landed assets, they're much more male-friendly than women. And so that already puts them at a disadvantage with that. If you look at our data in Nigeria, micro-led businesses, women-led businesses in the micro space, about 40%. But women-led businesses in the small and medium enterprise space are less than 25%, they're 22%. And so we're almost seeing what we see in the corporate level, where women drop off the higher as the business grows and matures. And so for us, one of the things that we've been doing is to say, how do you help to de-risk those issues? First of all, making sure that we empower the women with financial literacy knowledge that helps them build financial traction. So, and supporting them to get grants, supporting them to get single interest loans, making sure that they open bank accounts, making sure they understand the importance of separating business from personal accounts, because it's not like women don't invest the money in communities, and that's what they do. They invest a lot of the money into their communities instead of back in their businesses. So you don't want to say that that is wrong, but you want to help them to say, even if you're saying, okay, just give 10% or something that you can use to invest in companies, or reinvest it back in your business. So giving them financial literacy knowledge that allows them to properly invest or build a financial trail, financial traction. The other thing that also limits the collateral that or puts them at higher risk is their corporate governance. So more often than not, you find out that women put their brothers or their husbands or their fathers as part of their board members. So when they seek higher types of funding, people start to see that as red flag because they see that the woman is not the decision maker. Maybe when she's trying to set up or register the business, she gave maybe her husband or the father put in about 60% of the business. So this is a business she's leading. But if you look at the shareholding, she owns maybe less than half of that. So really also giving them corporate governance knowledge to understand, how do you also build the corporate structure, the shareholding requirement? How do you exit shareholders? That also makes sure that you have even much more percentage ownership of the business over time. And then the first thing I would say for now is preparing them as pipeline for larger growth. So even if they're only able to access $50,000, you make sure that they can effectively access that, but give them the technical support, particularly in sector and industry areas, which honestly is the challenge. So make sure that you're investing in mentoring, technical advisory, technical support that gives them specific industry knowledge, particularly in agribusiness, in the creative space. There's quite a lot of help around in the technology space, but in the agribusiness, in the creative space, in the health and in the education space, provide the mentoring, provide the hand-holding for them to be able to apply that technical growth in building their business, and let them see that you may not be able to get this $200,000 in 2 to 3 years, but let's set KPIs and work with you and hand-hold you through that process.
Adenike, there's a question that's coming from the audience that's addressed to you, but I think this is a great question which everybody can chime in with their thoughts on. And the question is, what do you think a female design fund would look like? Adenike, I'll let you take that first since it was addressed to you.
Yes, so I think a female design fund has to be designed by women, with women also at the center. It's something that, and we've seen quite a lot of programs that are genderless funding programs, but that diligence, that detail in the design, in the structure, and also in the learning from the process, you have to pilot that fund. You have to understand what works. You have to bring women to be able to share with you their challenges in terms of accessing that fund and what has worked for them with that. So I think for me, number one is that. Number two, in terms of the female design fund, what we've also seen is in the communication of it. So we launched about 3 years ago for another partner program that we had, and we had less than 20% of women that applied. And when we looked at it, the problem was in the communication. The communication did not show a diversity and inclusion of the different types of women that will be eligible. So even though it was women designed, a lot of women did not see themselves in the way that program was communicated and that was designed. So communication, the storytelling of it is also important. And then what do you do with that first pilot? What are the stories you tell? How do you show the stories that people can also relate to, so that they also act as role models to other women that are also coming behind?
So again, it goes back to the issue of diversity in a way, isn't it? That if fund may be designed for a woman, but as a young woman, if I don't see myself in that remit, then it's kind of pointless. Sofía, I see you nodding about that, so I'm going to let you jump in here.
No. I mean, plus a million to it. Adenike was saying. I think it's the two sides. I mean, I think when we say yes, the average of female founders, at least in the startup ecosystem, is low, is between 15, as you're saying, and 20%. There are women. For example, we put a KPI, have 50% female representation. You have to proactively search for it, because maybe they don't. And I think this is something that us as women, we need to believe more in ourselves, and we need to go for it. Because if we see one point in the selection process or application form that doesn't fit, we're not going to apply. But the men that are kind of creating these applications to ensure that we look for them, we make them feel included, we make them feel that that's one very, very important point. And then also here I open also is specifically in the VC world, it's based on a business model that I need to 10x this company needs to 10x in order to be good to me. And I think many women and some women are looking for a more sustainable business that can even become global, very company, and very efficient and very profitable company, but might not want that 10x, or might not promise that 10x. Well, maybe men will promise it, and we all know that it's also a matter of vision. I think we also need to find a path of new ways of funding for those women that are looking for something that is more towards the sustainable business versus that aiming for something else, or also do to the startup women, also help them dare to be more ambitious as they also pitch for those VC funds.
Wendy, I'm going to come to you next. You work across 52 countries. That's a really diverse range, and I'm sure you see women entrepreneurs with different backgrounds, different skill sets, different experiences, and different challenges when it comes to funding. So even if you were to design a women's only fund, or specifically a fund for women, how would that work across 52 countries? What's your idea for a fund like that?
So yeah, I wanted to just talk generally about funds, and I can take that question also. One of the challenges that we've seen, because the multilateral development banks that we support through WeFi, they invest in a lot of funds. And one of the challenges with getting women-led funds is having women who will be the investors who have a track record. You know, the way the fund management world works is they want to see the track record, right? So one of the key focuses that we should all have is getting more women to work, in the funds industry, so that they can then go and create new funds, right? And now that we have some of them, we need to be backing them, and we need to make sure that it's not only female money that's going into those funds, but that the asset management industry is putting money into those funds. So these are very professional, decisions that need to be made in terms of what the returns are. And the more we can demonstrate that women have across the industry the experience and the expertise to raise these funds, it's very, very important. And we're seeing a generation of new women who are coming out and trying to do that. So I think that's really critical. The other thing is, in terms of many funds that we see, they're more successful when they're local or regional. So global funds are very difficult to support because they don't have the local knowledge, the really local understanding of what the barriers are. So while we can be here talking about generally what are the challenges for women and what are the complications as they run their businesses, the people that are, the Fate Foundation is working with, they have very specific market access problems and challenges. And the venture capital funds should really be able to help them solve those problems in their markets. So we see, more of a network, a lot of funds around the world who either are focused on women or who have a gender lens. Because if we can get the venture capital industry to not be putting, less than 10% of their money into women, but putting 40%, 50% of their money into women, that will be what moves the needle in the long run.
Anita, there's a question that's come in for you from the audience, and it's about the power of youth. And the question is, the power of youth is huge. They bring energy, innovation, and change to economies and societies. What insights do you have on tackling gender stereotypes to ensure young women are best prepared to become entrepreneurs?
Great, fantastic question. And I absolutely agree. Youth Business International also operates across some 55 countries, and Fate Foundation is one of our members. I think I'd like to go back to a point that Adenike raised in the first instance, which is there's the secret sauce for supporting young entrepreneurs, regardless of gender, really is that combination of business skills development, personal leadership development, and then access to the wider ecosystem, whether it's finance, markets, that kind of thing. Because very often they've got the structured business knowledge to make it happen. And the communications point that Adenike was raising is a really critical one. We're going through a whole kind of inclusion programming effort across our whole network, and women and programming for women has really come up as a top priority. And again, it starts with seeing the world from the woman's point of view. How do you design your support in a way which is appropriate? Sometimes it is as simple as designing things around family responsibilities. But then I think it also dives deeper into building up that personal confidence. And we will always come back to role models as well, which is the more you see people like yourself doing the kind of thing that you would like to do, the more you feel that you can do that. So it's a combination of excellent support, which is adapted for young women, and you're actually showcasing the work that young women are doing. And I think, earlier on, there was the self-confidence gap, or the stereotypes start in childhood. And I think, by the time somebody is 18, 20, 25, whatever, if they've got to the stage where they've got a business idea, there's probably still a backwater of you can't do it, you can't do it. So really to help them get that confidence, the structured experience, which also then helps them to get the finance, because if you are less risky because you've had really structured support, you've got a great mentor, you know what you're doing, then the money is in better hands.
Anita, you work so much with the youth. Now, one thing that I hear about often, and I hear from young entrepreneurs, is I'm not taken seriously because people think I'm too young to know what I'm doing. Ageism. How much of a problem is ageism when it comes to women looking for funding?
Yeah, it's what I was saying at the beginning, that people might have stereotypes about whether as a woman you should be running a business. And then I think, oh my goodness, you're too young to be, running a business. And I think that's why, and I'd like to hear from Adenike as well. I think in those early days, it does tend to be very much family and friends who are investing, perhaps, communities or peer groups, the people who know you and believe in you before you get to the stage where you might approach other investors. But actually, we see huge potential in young entrepreneurs. And increasingly, we're seeing huge potential, even at that micro and small entrepreneur level, of people who are wanting to design for social problems or environmental problems. That's where the energy is. But I do think that coupled with good support, from the YBI network or others who can give that support, that's what gives you the powerful combination of great energy and ideas with some backing to make sure you've got some structure around it. But it does take people to believe in you at the beginning. And I think that's where all of our members absolutely do believe in the power of young people. In our case, we have the kind of the widest definition of youth up to 35. But I think that's where having a great mentor who helps you, having structured support, and that kind of enabling the access to finance starts giving you that track record. And therefore people find you more credible, and then you can go on to grow your business over time. But not only do we believe in young people, but the unemployment crisis for young people has just been hugely exacerbated by COVID. Their economic opportunities are shrinking. We have always thought that entrepreneurship or self-employment or solopreneurship is a solution to that problem. That's even the need is even greater now than it was before. So I think it's both an economic case, but also a wider youth opportunities for the next generation case.
Adenike, did you want to weigh in here?
Yes, definitely. And I'd like to give an example. One of our entrepreneurs, who interestingly was also profiled in a recent YBI report, called Entrepreneurship Within Reach, which I'll definitely recommend for all of us to read. Her name is Toke Akipaju. I call her Toke, sorry, that's her middle name, but her name is Olabisi Akipaju. And she's the founder of an indigenous cosmetics company, which she started in her second year in school. And she started the business as a way of, again, young people trying to augment the income to be able to pay her tuition. And before you know it, she started to make all those local cosmetics and oils, and a lot of our friends started to buy it, and she's built a business. 6 years after, she's built a business that employs 20 people. She has 50 distributors across the country. And for those of you who know Nigeria and how wide it is, that really is something. She's not up to 30 years old. And even though she was impacted by this pandemic, she was really able to get back again and really rebuild for better. And what are the important critical elements to ensure that that happens? First is that you help them create that financial trail, which, as Anita had mentioned, whether it's money they're putting in their business, whether it's income they're putting back, whether it's grants, they need to open a bank account. They need to start to keep financial records. And then you position them, which was what we did, started to position Toke for grants opportunities. So free money that's available that she may not have thought she was confident, but really letting her know why her business really was in the best position to do it, or just apply for it and do it afraid. And BC was then able to, from there, now build up and now access larger development funds to date and all of that. The other aspect of it is sometimes you also understand, you have to understand the environments that they are. And Wendy made a point around localizing that support. There are access to market issues in Nigeria that are very infrastructurally challenging. So somebody like BC has fantastic products, but if she needs to move them across to the north, I mean, we're having global supply chain challenges. It's even more so in our part of the country. So really plugging her. So at that point, it wasn't giving her money. It was plugging her into supply chain networks, giving her access to markets, to locations, to stores, and people who can provide advisory support for her in how to access those larger things. The fourth thing is around the opportunities that digitalization brings, right? And making sure that she has digital marketplaces to be able to do that. So whether it's a Google My Business store or whatever it is, making sure that she's visible and she's empowered. We have found in our programs that women have a higher take for digital literacy than our male participants. They take it on faster. They're able to use their social media marketing channels and really grow with it. WhatsApp has become one of the highest growth accelerators for access to market for us here. So really empowering them with those tools that are cheap, that are even easy, free to access, and helping them to use it properly. The last but not the least, which I would also say here, is another point that was mentioned in the Entrepreneurship Within Reach report, which is around ensuring that the enabling environment is also supportive for them. Particularly for women, we have to encourage, and young women, we have to encourage them to be active participants in their industry groups, trade groups, chambers of commerce. You help them, and it's not just understanding the policies that impact them, but giving them entrepreneurial leadership development so that they start to have a voice. They understand the policies at stake, but their needs are represented, and there's a much more diverse voice in the room. And I can tell you that some of our youngest women members, including Bessie, are shaking up chambers of commerces in different states in Nigeria. And you need to do that. It's still a long journey, but you need to start positioning them in those policy spaces that are relevant to their businesses. Because guess who designs the policies and laws that also impact women? It's more men. And if you don't channel them, and particularly young women, position them to also develop those skills at leadership and have a voice in the business space, we'll continue to put them at a disadvantage.
Can you give us a quick example of how one of these young women is shaking up a chamber of commerce?
So one of the things that we did through one of our incubator programs was, so we have one of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce. It's over 100 years old, and one of the things, I'm a member of the council of the chamber. One of the decisions we made at the chamber was that we had to have young people represented there at the chamber, and that, so we did that. But what we did in particular was also ensure that we supported our young entrepreneurs within the incubation program to start being part of those conversations, making sure that they also got membership within the different groups that they were in. So whether it's the agribusiness groups, the fashion groups, the creative groups, just be there, understand it there. At the meetings, get them prepared for those meetings. Let them ask the right questions. So mentoring is not just mentoring them in business, but mentoring them in entrepreneurship leadership, so that they're also not scared. I mean, you're in a place where you have people that are your grandfather's age, not even your father's age. And if you come from an environment like ours that is very patriarchal and is also very respectful, you know, you can't always be challenging. It's not that you can't be challenging, but you have to guide in terms of effectively challenging using their voice. And what we also find that is happening is that people are listening, because they're also saying that these people are leading business. If you are meeting a 28-year-old who is running a business that has 20 people full-time and 50 people part-time running, you would listen to her, making sure that when there are panel conversations, they are on those panels. So what are we also ensuring about representation? When we have sector conversations, making sure that their names are submitted so that they also have voices at the table, and they also build their own voices and ensure that people hear them too.
Wendy, I want to come to you next. And I had a question about alternative sources of funding. Someone in the audience has a question. I was going to ask you about alternatives as in non-banks, but the question from the audience is about banks. So let's get to the audience question first, and then I'll come back to you with my question. And the question is, what would be the changes that banks could make to make it easier for young women entrepreneurs to secure a loan from a bank?
Yeah, so the first thing is they have to think about their products and services, and whether their products and services really meet the needs of women who, as I've said, have smaller businesses, less assets, and youth. And a lot of that starts with kind of early stage funding or working capital types of products. So, working capital credit that might not require collateral, or that's based on trade sales. So we see a bank that's in South Africa called Time Bank, which is doing really amazing things. They have their kiosks, basically where you get your account in grocery stores, and women are able to get access to finance. They're also able to create digital presence for their products that they're selling through this platform, through a partnership that Time Bank has formed with digital service providers. And all of that information about the sales, the accounts, goes into their credit history so that Time Bank can think more easily about how to give credit, maybe to begin with in shorter bursts, and then thinking about longer term financing for women. So they need to be thinking about these things. In a product like that, it really starts at the beginning, really understanding the clients, really understanding their needs, and not starting with the legacy of what banks have looked at historically. Really thinking totally different. Where do women access? Where are their access points for finance? How do they interface with? What about time? How do they use time? Digital is so important for women because they're very time starved. So if we can create financial services that are digital, and I think one of the results of the pandemic has been that many, many more financial institutions are making it much easier to do everything digitally, which is great for women. They need to focus much more on those kinds of products. So examples like fintechs, examples like Time are really, really important. There's also a lot of work going on in value chains and digitization of value chains and value chain financing. And women have traditionally had a hard time really growing businesses in these value chains. The crisis has made it much more complicated, and really, I think there is an issue with both corporates and banks going back to their old traditional partners and not sticking with the clients that maybe have come to them more recently, or the suppliers that have come to them more recently. So finding ways to digitize sales in the value chain can be very, very helpful for women. It starts with women digitizing their own businesses, right? And so one of the things that we have seen is, I think somebody else mentioned it, during the crisis, we've actually seen data that shows that women have been adjusting and going online more than men. Right. So they've shown more agility and more interest in focusing on and really upskilling and expanding their businesses online. That's amazing. And I think that's a great data point that really helps us understand where the path is for the future for women entrepreneurs. Is really, it has to be tied to technology. In these value chains, women who have stores, women who have salons, getting their products online, getting their sales online, getting payments online is all going to be very, very important, because that in the end creates a financing data stream that can help them get access to finance down the road. So the technology piece is going to be very, very important going forward for women.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, the one thing we have seen as a result of the pandemic is digital acceleration is happening at such at lightning speed. I think it's taken us all by surprise. But Anita, in that, as Wendy was saying, is in that lies an opportunity, doesn't it? Anita, I think you're still on mute, which again happened.
We know how to do that
all the time.
I absolutely think that is, Wendy is spot on, because I think it's how do you develop incremental records that start to build a bigger financial picture. And digital is absolutely an amazing way to do that. In fact, one of our members in Kenya, working particularly in the urban settlements, with people who really do not have access to finance, it was an entrepreneur there who developed or had the idea to develop a very simple, low-spec tool, which does exactly what Wendy's talking about. All of their activity data, their sales data, all of it goes immediately onto this app, which then is used to start getting smaller and then bigger amounts of funding. So I think there is a huge opportunity. But I think there's also another question about if digital is part of the future, what do you do when women don't have the same digital access? Exactly. And I think that is not as much gender-based necessarily as it is, regionally based in terms of financial infrastructure. And we've seen that really come up through the pandemic. And huge amount of work has gone in to try to bridge that at an activity level, but not yet at an infrastructure level. Providing people with the actual phones or tablets, providing them with data credits, using old technology to reach them like radio and television. But I think if digital is the future, then I think products also need to be designed for the widest range of technical availability, and not that everything has to be high end, but also low spec applications.
And it seems like someone in the audience is in exactly the same page as you, Anita. This question has come in. This is a question for Sofía. And the question is, we've been talking about access to finance, but how possible will this be if young women entrepreneurs don't have equal access to the digital landscape? So exactly what you said, Anita. I mean, what good is it to talk about fintech and accessing funds through a digital ecosystem if you can't be online, if you don't have the resources to get there in the first place? Sofía, I'm going to let you take that.
Yeah. So I think thanks for the question, and I think like as Google, so I lead Google for Startups specifically, and we work specifically with this tribe. But I think as a company, we really have a pledge to really help 10 million people and businesses in Europe, Middle East and Africa, find jobs, digitalize, and grow by the end of 2021 this year. So we're really trying to act and give back and support the digitalization of the entire community by, one, helping people find jobs by giving them access to the digital skills that they need to really be able to get there, helping SMBs go digital to really be able to take grasp on the opportunity that has accelerated so much with the crisis and the pandemic that we just all experience. And then at Google for Startups, working specifically with this kind of more tech-based or entrepreneurs to really help them grow, go global. And by actually, we're not, apart from the Black Founders Fund, we're normally not investing per se, but we're really helping them with the best of Google, with our products, their expertise, and actually even with creating a community among them to really be able to go beyond. But I think it's interesting and it's important to see that we're really devoted to help the whole economy go digital, from the skills to help people find the jobs in this new economy, to the SMBs to the startups.
I think the first thing we need to do is really bridge the digital divide, isn't it? We need to make sure that everybody has the ability to be online. And at the moment around the world, everybody doesn't. Wendy?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in also on the technology issue. It's one thing I absolutely could not agree. It starts with access to technology. Yeah. But the other thing is we need women driving technological change. So we really need women who are being trained. Do they know how to code? Do they know how to use different applications? Can they build apps? So we're supporting, for example, a group called Gebea in Ethiopia, which is a training entity for tech skills to focus more on women who can become entrepreneurs in the tech field. So training them how to code for apps, how to develop, new technologies. And what we want to see is more and more women not only using technologies exist, but actually driving, technological change. And we work, for example, also in Latin America with the Inter-American Development Bank. They have a program called We Exchange, which mentors and develops networks and training and connects entrepreneurs with finance in Latin America. But they have a very, very strong focus on STEM. And what you see there is a lot of women who come to entrepreneurship from a skill set. There's an example of a woman who's a lawyer by training, and then, got the training, got the experience to help develop an app that could give women shop owners the skills to administer their business and whatnot. So the skill set is really needed to drive women's entree into this field. And unfortunately, in the STEM field, so few women go in. The pipeline is very small. So we need to think about how do we continuously help them build those technology skills.
That's a great point. One thing that came up early in this conversation was the importance of local knowledge, right? We can't discount that. And with that, it makes me think about microfinance. And a couple of years ago, that was really, seen as the savior for women entrepreneurs, especially in rural areas. I saw a lot of that in India, where I'm from. Adenike, is that a viable option? What is the role of microfinance for women entrepreneurs?
So you picked a comment I was going to address at the end if we didn't address it. And I think it's very important for us to learn the lessons from microfinance. One of the reasons why microfinance works is that it takes in cognizance communities and groups of women. So if you think of micro businesses, women in the marketplaces, market groups, in religious associations, in community areas, it allows them to leverage on the power of a group, and then allows the people who want to finance them benefit from the power of a group. So the women will pay back, because not just because she wants to pay back, but because she can't let her group people down, and everybody benefits from that. And so Sofía said something about communities, and I want to add that those communities should not just be virtual, they should also be physical, particularly in environments like Asia and Africa, where it's still very important. So while we try to bridge the digital divide, we should understand that we should look and we should say, where are the village groups, the community groups, the religious groups that people listen to and people benefit from? Bring in those people who are leaders that the women take at, and the politicians know this, and that's why during elections they know where to go to when they want women votes. And for us to bridge that finance gap, we need to also take those lessons and go there. If we're looking for he for she's, the he for she's are the pastors, the imams, and all the other traditional rulers within the spaces, because whether or not we like it, that's really how it is in a lot of our local communities, and really understanding that while also building the pipeline for that. And then you now move beyond that. So if the women have shown to be bankable at the microfinance level, I think that's where the problem is. You then don't now bring them up to another level, and we still have that revolving microfinance perspective of it. So there are quite a lot of lessons to learn, and that's why even in Nigeria, you still find the microfinance space evolving. One of the other things that they've done is, particularly for women, again, is to now take that particular support to an access to market, and then also a sector perspective. So instead of giving the woman money directly, they match. So there are two programs I know. These are not our programs, but they're very good examples that I'd like to share, that they match them with one of the leading FMCGs in Nigeria, and they finance the women to be able to supply products and vice versa if they need to retail those products. So create those type of programs and structures that leverage on those community groups and the power of the community to enable different forms of financing programs for women.
Anita, I know you wanted to jump in here.
The comment I wanted to make was about digital, but I also think that Adenike, I'll make 2 points. So on the digital, I think one of the things is, apart from actual access to technology kit or to broadband and so forth, is that it also requires literacy and financial literacy.
Yes.
And there's a further, barrier there. So I think a huge opportunity, but also, for us to be mindful of where are the exclusionary factors as well. But I think that, the comment that Adenike just made about FMCG and those kind of market or supply chain connections, I think there are wider ways apart from direct access to finance to support women in both building their businesses, but also getting different forms of finance. And we've seen some really creative work done within our network where our members will work with a major company to look differently at how they do their procurement in order to very consciously support either, Black suppliers, female suppliers, Indigenous suppliers, and so forth. And the hurdles are never insuperable. It's very often about matching the gap between people who are just less experienced in the kind of intense procurement processes and what companies need. So I think there are a lot of ways to provide indirect finance, if I can call it that, and to build up the strength of the business for women.
We're almost out of time, and there is one more theme I want to cover, and I want to talk about access to local markets and even global markets. But before I come to you, Wendy, with that question, putting you on the spot, one thing I will come to everybody with in a minute, and I'm telling you now just so you can start thinking about it, is we are asking everyone on the program today to make a pledge. Just tell us, have a think about what you will do to make it easier for women entrepreneurs to get financing. So it's a call to action, and I'm going to ask you, you can think about it in terms of the pillars of educate, participate, advocate, donate. So just have a think about how you can take a call to action, what you can do to make it easier for women entrepreneurs. While you think about that, Wendy, what about helping women entrepreneurs access markets, whether it's literally a local market or whether it's your domestic national scale market or global markets? Tell us a little bit about how important that is, because without that market, there really isn't that much opportunity for entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. And I think the kind of work that Fate Foundation does, which also helps create those networks into local markets, is very important. But if I can speak a little bit about export markets, exporters are generally more profitable, they grow faster, and they're more productive than companies that only serve the local market. So when we think about exporters, it's similar to many stories where men have more businesses that are exporting and women have fewer businesses that are exporting. So getting women into international markets is important, not just because it creates new markets for them. There's also very important technology transfers that come back to the enterprises when they're trading with others. They understand more about standards, quality control, supply chains. And so there's a lot of technical knowledge that comes out of doing that. One important tool women have, and we've talked about their technology links, is they can now use e-commerce websites and find customers online. That's a very powerful. Many of the global platforms and regional platforms have opportunities for women to engage on those platforms and sell that way. But there's a lot of challenges that come with that also, from customs and trade, logistics, and that's where they also need support with others. Working in value chains and selling to corporates and selling, say in agricultural value chains remains also very challenging. And the large corporate supply chains are compressing. And what that means is they're using fewer suppliers to get their goods. Right. They're trying to have more control through having fewer suppliers. And so really making sure that women are linked in and understand the standards and requirements, and that they can deliver, a quality product sustainably into those corporates is very important. There's groups like We Connect and others that try to make those connections and try to make sure that women have the training to make those sales and keep them, which is the challenging part. Not to make one, but to make them month after month, year after year, and to grow those programs. So that's very important.
We are out of time. I can't believe how quickly this hour has gone. So I'm not even going to give you a minute to make your pledge. Just one sentence each for your call to action, your pledge. Anita, first you.
So in the work that I'm doing to drive forward inclusive programming across YBI, we will have gender there, and we will include finance in that work. And Adenike is one of my trustees, and she will hold me to account.
Okay, and Adenike, your turn. In one sentence, what's your call to action?
Yeah, so my call to action will be in the initial statistics that I talked about, growth stage women businesses being less than a quarter, is showing more data around that and our learnings on that, and advocating for improved growth financing for women.
Showing more data for that. Okay, perfect. Sofía, your turn in one sentence.
So at Google for Startups, we will continue having diversity at the core of everything that we do, ensuring that we have 50% representation on our acceleration programs, and actually continue with our more specific female founder programs, and I hope also with the Black Founders Fund.
More diversity. Wendy, last word, last sentence to you.
So over the next few months, WeFi will be allocating another $50 to $60 million to support women entrepreneurs through our implementing partners. But I wanted to actually make my point on data, which Adenike brought up. I think we all should do a better job really pushing financial institutions, corporates, governments to explain more what they're doing with the data, and do they have data on financing women? We have a very hard time knowing what they're doing, so hold them accountable.
Transparency and accountability. Thank you all so much. It's been fascinating, and there have been, I hope, many new ideas for the audience that's come out of this. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to our speakers. And now we're going to take a quick 15-minute break. You can use this time to do some networking. Remember the sponsor booths on the left side, Bank of America, Google, Blackstone, also the Cherie Blair Foundation booth. Our staff is waiting there. You can also network with other attendees. And remember what I said earlier about donating. There's a GoFundMe option, the fashion auction that's still ongoing. So take a look there. And I'll see you in 15 minutes for a panel that I'll be on, a little bit of role reversal there. And we're going to talk about the role of media in tackling gender stereotypes. We'll see you in 15 minutes.